This is Dean Val with Dean Kevin and Jeremy with the Environmental Awareness Show. Today we're talking about the environment and all things environmental. I'll start off with an article here from, I guess it's from a magazine here, but this is a new June of this year, 2021. I'll read this article just for your information. It's interesting how it's called in the Amazon, Farming the Forest to Save the Forest. And this is just something, an example of something that people are doing to benefit the planet, not destroy it. A groundbreaking Brazilian community demonstrates how to farm sustainably in the Amazon. No cattle necessary. Open a new road in the Amazon and deforestation most often follows, creating a landscape of big sky, white cows, and green pastures. But on the back roads around the frontier town of Nova, California, in a remote corner of northwestern Brazil, a renewed verdant canopy closes in. As we crawl down a slick and red mud road in a four-wheel drive truck, Dilison Fortunato, our guide, points out acai plant palms whose slender fronds lap at the stout trunks of towering Brazil nut trees. Beneath the canopy, sour cupuaçu fruits hang like bloated potatoes from the branches of the small, rounded species. Although these particular forests look natural, they're not. They're comprised of cultivated, edible Amazonian plants. These forests, because Fortunato's employer, a local agroforestry cooperative called RECA, R-E-C-A, has made it economically viable to plant and tend them. An especially important endeavor at a time when the rainforest is being raised at an alarming rate. For decades, cattle ranching has been the dominant economic activity in the Amazon, driving 80% of the forest loss. Ranchers get caught in a vicious cycle, felling forests and establishing pastures that quickly deplete the nutrients in the thin tropical soils. Once depleted, yields of beef per acre diminish. So the ranchers move on, converting more forests to pastures until those soils are shot too. So far, nearly a fifth of the Amazon has been cleared. But because agroforestry systems require far less land than cattle to make a living, they could take the pressure off the rainforest that remains if they were more widely implemented. RECA, R-E-C-A, a co-op founded in 1989, demonstrates how it could be done. The natural rainforest preserves biodiversity, protects soil and water, and sequesters carbon in its trees, mitigating climate change. RECA's farmers approximate that ecosystem, densely planting up to 40 species in their recreated rainforest parcels. The co-op processes about a dozen of these species into forest products sold throughout Brazil. Fruit juice, palm hearts, oils. The rest, including medicinal plants, supply local markets. Others are planted simply to benefit soil and wildlife. Some of the harvest is even exported. RECA's top crop is cupuaçu, a relative of the cacao tree. Its seeds are pressed into an oil purchased by the Brazilian cosmetics conglomerate Natura, which owns Avon and The Body Shop. A French cosmetics company with stores across the United States buys the seeds of the camellia tree, which lend a vanilla almond fragrance to the company's Kumura Reyes Colon. The more than 300 families in the co-op earn about 5 times more per acre from their agroforestry plots annually than local ranchers do from their pastures. 30 years ago, a lot of people thought the folks of Rica were insane, says Fortunato, a barrel-chested young man with a thick black beard. Still today, people think agroforestry does not provide a viable livelihood that we know it can. Fortunato himself exemplifies that shift. The son of a local rancher, he was drawn away from the family business by Rica's alternative vision for the Amazon, valuing trees over pastures, growing fruit instead of cattle. We pull up to the home of Maria and Raimundo de Sousa, early Rica members who moved to the area from northeastern Brazil in 1977. Facing dire poverty, they lived in a canvas tent when they arrived. We survived because of Rica, says Maria, sitting in a rocking chair on a clean swept veranda, where coffee tins planted with flowers have been mounted to the wall of the board and batten house. We suffered a lot, but today we are comfortable, says Raimundo, a grizzled man wearing muck boots and a baseball cap. He points out a mango tree in the yard under which some of the first Rica's meetings were held. Claudio Moretti, a former president of ICMBio, the federal agency overseeing protected land in Brazil, views agroforestry ventures such as Rica as a model for reclaiming parts of the Amazon, especially on the pastures that have been abandoned because they can no longer support cattle, which comprise more than half of the land that has been cleared. Agroforestry is a system for recovery, for attracting native pollinators and wildlife to return, and for providing ecological services, Moretti says. He says that the agroforestry plantings also help maintain the Amazon's flying rivers. Moisture-laden currents of air transpired by trees that ensure rainfall throughout much of the continent. Those will likely disappear if too much rainforest is felled. There are also global benefits. According to Project Drawdown, an analysis of the most promising climate solutions, agroforestry systems sequester up to 11 tons of carbon per acre each year, 8 times more than that pulled from the atmosphere, if tropical forests are allowed to regenerate without human intervention. That's because the agroforestry systems get weeding and fertilizer and irrigation, explains Eric Tonsmeyer, a senior fellow at Project Drawdown. Despite the clear benefits of agroforestry, there are powerful forces favoring cattle over trees in the Amazon. Nova, California, a town of 3,000, lies in the state of Rondônia along the BR 364 highway, a major drug trafficking corridor where vehicles weave around potholes, craters, really as many are the size of a queen mattress that pock the asphalt every few feet in some stretches. Sawmills line the highway on one side of town, clouds of acrid smoke rising from their kilns. With its dusty dirt streets, the ranchers in cowboy boots, Nova California feels like the Wild West, complete with a growing reputation of lawlessness. In the past 5 years, at least 20 people have been murdered in land conflicts involving the local loggers, which has been behind much of the illegal deforestation in the area. In one region north of town, just beyond where the majority of the Rica properties are concentrated, small-scale farmers have been systematically driven out at gunpoint. According to reports by investigative journalists in Brazil, their homes ransacked and torched. By the way, down here in Mexico, one of the properties we're looking at, Reynoso, they own a number of homes on the beach development. Part of this land that they owned one point years ago, the cartel came in with guns and gave them or offered them a deal they couldn't refuse. They offered them a sum of money, and if they didn't take it, well, they're going to take it anyway. So Reynoso took the money, and the cartel owns this property now, and that's one of the properties we'll be negotiating with through a third party. But let's see what happens with that. A lot of the beachfront property here in Mexico is very valuable in Baja because it's tourism. A lot of money comes in through tourism, and the Mexicans themselves enjoy the beach here, and it's prime property here. But that's where we're going to have our university on the beachfront, one of the properties here, and this other piece of land we're looking at. So we'll see what happens with that. Pedro Soares, a manager of the climate change program in IDSM, a Brazilian NGO, says it's a pattern found in frontier regions throughout the Amazon. Loggers intimidate local residents, cut the most valuable timber, clear the land with fire, plant pasture, and attempt to establish ownership through a grilligem, a time-worn process of paperwork doctoring. Under a 1996 law, landowners in the Amazon cannot deforest more than 20% of their plots. But through this violent, fraudulent process, the rainforest is being knocked down at a far faster rate. In fact, Rondônia has the third highest rate of deforestation in the Amazon. In the far western tip of the state, where Raca is located, large tracts of virgin forest can still be found a few miles from the highway, but they are rapidly disappearing. Ranching is knocking at their door, says Soros, whose job includes providing technical support for sustainable development projects in the Amazon, including RECA. RECA is a one-of-a-kind initiative that is far ahead of similar cooperatives in the Amazon, but it is under immense pressure. RECA farmers have suffered occasional incursions into their forests. Ursane Berkenbach, the 24-year-old daughter of one of RECA's founding families, says the last year someone had entered the back of her sister's property and began cutting Ruximbo trees, a species with wine-colored heartwood prized for height and woodworking. The family notified the environmental authorities, but nothing happened, says Berkenbach. Deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon expanded by 34% in 2019, according to INPE, the first year of Jair Bolsonaro's presidency. He defunded the agencies that enforce environmental regulations and made full-throttled economic development in the Amazon a top priority. That summer, tens of thousands of fires were set across the Amazon to clear land for cattle, making headlines around the world. In September, Genesilda Lima Maya, a 38-year-old RECA farmer, was alarmed to discover a fire started by a neighbor had spread to her property. The nearest fire department is nearly 100 miles away. But in response to the constant threat of conflagration, RECA had recently procured firefighting equipment and organized its own volunteer brigade of the farmers themselves. Maya's Blaze was one of their first tests. The fire truck came, everyone got together, and we put it out. But not before 6 acres of newly planted trees were destroyed. The fires were even worse in 2020. And the Albuña district of Rondônia, where RECA is located, had the third highest number in the Amazon. Fabio Velati, who oversees RICA's fire response efforts, blames Bolsonaro, who at one point suggested that environmental groups were setting the fires to generate publicity. I was never worried about fires in the past, said Velati. We had some every year, but the numbers were small. Now there is a sense of impunity, which has led many people in our area to use this practice. And that's sort of the way it is here in Mexico and Baja. There's a lot of the crime that does go on. It's unpunished. You basically are on your own. Lucky if you can get some kind of help from the authorities. So it's like who you know, your connections, how much money you have. It's different here as it is here apparently in Brazil. The breeze that meets us upon entering Bernadette and Sergio Lopez Grove of 80-foot Brazil nut trees makes the sweltering day seem suddenly bearable. It's like air conditioning, says Sergio. Unlike most of the settlers who founded RICA, Bernadette and Sergio are well educated. She was a nurse technician, he was a professor. The couple caught the back to the land bug in the 1980s, uprooting their life in southern Brazil to move to the Amazonian frontier. The majority of early RICA members were landless farmers from other parts of the country who left behind a life of poverty for the promise of cheap land, a carrot that the country's military dictatorship dangled to promote settlement in the Amazon. The hundreds of thousands who migrated to the region in the 1970s and 80s are unwitting executors of the government's plan to bolster the national economy by exploiting the untapped resources of the Amazon, which was then largely intact rainforest. The settlers were given government loans to cut down the forest, and in some cases were required to, as a condition for receiving free land. They planted rice and other annual crops they were familiar with from the farming communities they'd fled, but yields quickly diminished in the poor rainforest soils. Many, including those who later formed RICA, were destitute. And doesn't this sound like the United States of America, where the European monarchies promised free land and freedom of religion, etc., to the settlers to move to America, to wipe out the indigenous people, settle here, start their communities, and basically create the takeover country that the United States was formed to be. In the early days, Sergio would throw the sacks of rice they produced over his back and haul them 1.5 miles along a trail to the highway, unpaved at the time, where buyers would pick them up. The road was virtually impassable then during the rainy season, leaving the community cut off from the outside world and unable to sell their crops. For nearly half the year, electricity arrived in 1987, though only for 4 hours a day. Telephone service was unavailable outside town until after the millennium. The Lopez family survived multiple bouts of malaria, but many of their neighbors succumbed to the disease. Overwhelmed with hardship, settlers left in droves. People sold their land for the cost of a bus ticket home, said Sergio. They'd do anything to leave. We realized we had to do something. So some of the settlers in Nova California began harvesting wild plants. They learned from local rubber tappers, forest-dwelling communities that spread across the Amazon during the 19th century. A few settler families began organizing work parties, helping each other plant these species on their degraded farmland. And the cooperative, which is now organized into 10 neighborhood-based collectives, was born. In 1989, a Catholic charity provided much-needed seed money for RICA's 86 founding families to scale up their tree plantings and purchase processing equipment. A bigger break came in 2003 when they landed the contract with Natura, the Brazilian cosmetics company. As sales grew, members upgraded their mud and straw homes to brick structures. In the 90s, the group established a health clinic, a school, and a radio station in Nova, California. An auditorium was built for community events and adult education classes, ranging from business management to organic farming and women's empowerment. When the UN Development Program awarded RICA its Equator Prize in 2010, they noted that not only had the co-op filled many of the social service gaps that have been left by the government, it had been the source of the majority of investments into local infrastructure. Okay, the article goes on and on. It's a long article. I'll just stop here. Basically, I want to give you an idea again, what people are doing out there. They started with humble beginnings, and they are now going pretty strong, offsetting what the others are doing to setting fire to the Amazon rainforest to provide pasture for the cattle, which the cattle destroy the soil and vegetation, and they cut down more trees to get more pasture, so it's ongoing. Whereas the agroforestry system seems to be working for these people. It's more renewable, it's sustainable. So that's my share, you guys, today. Do you have any comments on that? Oh, before I stop, again, remind you to plant your trees. You have a sapling awaiting there. Kevin, Jeremy, if you can find a tree to plant, take a picture, put it on our site, the Facebook group, New Trees for Our World or our Earth, whatever it's called. And let's get going with that. Okay, any comments?
Yeah, I'm just deliberating over which tree to choose. I'm trying to pick the one which will have the greatest survivability, because some of them, they say on the site, prefer warm conditions, some prefer shaded conditions. So it's all a case of where I want to put it and the best chance for its survival to be. So I think there's whittled it down to two choices. One I think is going to be a crabapple tree, and I think the other one was a walnut tree. So they're my two choices. So I'll probably have ordered it by the weekend and possibly be planting it in the week to come.
Great.
But,
I noticed up here, I'm on a hillside with the community garden in La Mission, how the wind affects things. I mean, surprisingly, it's very windy here. There's a valley, like a wind tunnel coming from the ocean into the valley, and it's rather windy most every day, and that really does affect the plants here. I mean, the soil is poor, but the wind too takes a toll on the plants. They get some of them don't survive just because of the wind conditions too. So I'm just taking that into note too as I plant things. I'm trying to get a cover, like a shelter, like a barrier for the wind for the property here. It's going to take a while though, because everything is pretty barren here. Go ahead.
I was going to say, in regards to what you were talking about the fires and such, like I mentioned on a previous show, and I imagine everyone's aware of by now, part of the reason why they're destroying all the forestry deliberately is because obviously anything organic actually mitigates the effects of 5G, and so that's another reason why they're destroying it. They don't want anything that can upset their rollout of their 5G infrastructure. And I thought it was very interesting as well with the laser fires, because a lot of people assumed that the laser fires are what are hitting the trees and the foliage and causing the fires to be so. But a lot of people, when they see it, they report them actually hitting the ground. And what a lot of people have proposed theory-wise is that all the metallic particulate matter that are in the chemtrails, as it comes down and sinks into the ground, it makes the ground extremely flammable, and that's in fact what the lasers are hitting, and it then heats up the ground to ludicrous degree proportions, because some people have been on there prior to the fires and they put little thermo detecting devices in the ground and discovered the heat beneath the surface is like 400 and 500 degrees Fahrenheit. And then so it seems that is actually generally what is actually causing the fires. The the lasers come down, they hit the ground, which is already very flammable and primed to be so through the particulate matter that's come down in the chemtrails. Then it just sets everything ablaze.
Yeah, there's sparklers that you use in fireworks. I think that's barium in there. Those little things that light up. So that's what they're spraying too. The barium, aluminum, strontium, very flammable. I mean, when you set the sparkler on fire, just so it's the same idea. All this stuff is in the ground. I think that's barium, actually. It's in that.
Yeah, on the previous show, there was only really one advantage of these fires, but that's obviously if they occur naturally. And that was in regards to the biggest trees, that their natural competition is everything else, and these fires clear out all the competition. And because of these giant trees, because of their bark is so resistant and fireproof, they're the only things that can survive. Obviously natural fires, not ones that are created by the controllers. And so actually fires are a natural process that allows then these giant trees to thrive and not be and have enough nutrients that they need, that it doesn't get all scoffed up by all the little weeds and stuff. But that's the only thing that fire would actually serve as an advantage of. It was very interesting. I came across a brief thing the other day where it was in regards to wheat and bread, and they said because of Monsanto and various other companies and corporations taking complete control of all the various wheat and such, and I think there was a case where there's no original or natural wheat that's available anymore, or something like that. But people have found an interesting way of getting around that. What was quite common in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and such, was people would have these decorative wreaths that they would put on their doors, and they would consist of all sorts of natural material like twigs and leaves. But what a lot of people have found is they also contained seeds as well. And so people have been going around these old flea markets and junkyard sales, and they've been finding these old 100-year-old wreaths, and they've been taking the seeds that are hundreds of years old, and they've been able to grow natural food from these seeds that at the moment aren't available. So just go show a seed can remain dormant for hundreds of years and still be viable to grow stuff from. And it's very surprising where you might find these seeds. And that's one way they were doing it. Because as I said, the controllers are monopolising everything and trying to destroy everything natural, and only wanting their GMO and genetically modified stuff to be available in their seeds and such. But as I say, I was quite well, that's quite interesting. I just thought to add that as well.
Yes, interesting.
But today I wanted to continue on from where I left off last time in regards to the giant trees of ancient times, and then it went into a bit about the Smithsonian Institute, which was developed in order to basically suppress all this stuff that was being found from the ancient world and sequester it away and destroy a lot of it. There is a theory that this Earth was once populated with massive giant trees that reached to our atmosphere. All around the world we find these strange giant mountain towers that just don't fit in with where they are located. In many cases, the resemblance to massive tree stumps is undeniable. Could these mountains and gigantic rocks serve as evidence that the Earth was once populated by massive trees, and that our current forests are merely the leftover shrubs? Are flat-top mountains the remnants of behemoth trees? The tallest trees in the world today are redwoods, which tower above the ground in California. These trees can easily reach heights of 300 feet, but these are just little shrubs in comparison. Some people contend that our planet has not always experienced the same level of gravity that it does today. In the past, for reasons that have not been elucidated, such as the hypothesis of the proximity of the moon, of a giant comet, or an enormous spacecraft, this gravity has since been considerably diminished. Consequence of heavy gravity is giant animals, giant plants, and giant humanoids. We have seen how periods of gigantism have repeatedly affected the fauna and flora of this planet, whose true past remains largely unknown. Dinosaurs, giant mammals, tree ferns, sequoia, many clues remain which should help scientists drastically revise their positions on the issue of gigantism. Giant bones are and have been regularly discovered, but information on these major issues remains very discreet. Even worse, the respectable Smithsonian Institution, or so-called respectable, would have been guilty of destroying evidence. Many bones of giants, deemed too embarrassing, would have been destroyed at the beginning of the last century. A terrible loss for science, which nevertheless congratulates itself on it, satisfied that it doesn't have to disavow itself, and to rewrite, page by page, the false history of our planet that has been stubbornly rehearsed for ages, cursing those who do not agree with it. Was there once a time when trees were unimaginable in size, and they reached high up into the heavens? What does ancient writing say about the giant trees? The tree grew, and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. Daniel 4:11. Here's a passage from the first book of Enoch discussing the tree of life. Enoch 26:1. And from there I went to the middle of the earth, and saw a blessed, well-watered place, which had branches which remained alive, and sprouted from a tree which had been cut down. Enoch 26:2. And there I saw a holy mountain, and under the mountain to the east of it there was water, and it flowed toward the south. Another one from 2 Enoch 8:3 and 8:4. And in the midst of the trees that of life, in that place whereon the Lord rests, when he goes up into paradise, and this tree is of ineffable goodness and fragrance, and adorned more than every existing thing, and on all sides it is in form gold-looking and vermilion and fire-like, and covers all, and it has produce from all fruits. Its root is in the garden at the earth's end. End is Eden. You can find these ancient tree stumps all over the earth. We have Ben Bulben in Ireland, Jagatha tableland in Tunisia, Mount Connor in Australia, also known as the Crimson Plateau, Mount Garfield in Colorado. Next we have the Superstition Mountains in Arizona, Table Mountain in South Africa, Los Organos in the Canary Islands. This one has basalt columns like the Devil's Tower. In Venezuela there are many: Cuquenan Tepuy, Mount Roraima, Cerro Ortana or Ortana Mountain, just to name a couple. What's really unique about Cerro Ortana is that the native people here, the Pioroa, have a rich oral tradition for their mythology, and that includes Cerro Ortana as once being the tree of life. For the Pioroa Indians, the original inhabitants of the area, Ortana is a sacred mountain. Wahari Kuawai in the Pioroan language. It is Kuai Mai Yojo, the stump of, the sacred tree of the fruits of the world. Pioroan mythology tells how the tree top went as high as the infinite, and its branches were full of fruits, which fell and gave life to the Amazon. One day, Wahari, a god, and his nephew, Ruaye, cut down the tree to get all the fruits at once. Another, which is well known, is Devil's Tower, Wyoming. Steven Spielberg fans are likely familiar with Devil's Tower, even if they don't know it by name. It towers 1,267 feet above the plains of northeastern Wyoming, and the Bell Forch River, was famously featured in 1977's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, culminating in a scene in which an alien mothership descended upon the rock formation. The Devil's Tower, aka the Tree of Life in Wyoming, doesn't seem to be a natural rock formation due to lava, but a gigantic tree whose wood has been petrified for possibly thousands of years. Not long ago, a research report came out about an immense root network that was apparently discovered at its base. Graham Hancock and other reliable researchers do share this information, and here is the story. A huge and startling discovery has been made at the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Scientists from the Wyoming State's Parks Department were conducting photographic seismic readings below the tower when they discovered an incredibly large petrified root system below the tower. The Parks Department released a statement saying, "We have discovered what looks like a giant root system stemming from the base of the Devil's Tower. The root system has been measured at 4 miles deep by 7 miles wide. We are currently conducting studies and tests to confirm that this is actually a root system." This discovery is on the edge of rewriting history and science as we know it. Throughout the centuries, there have been many legends arising about these mysterious natural phenomena, but one thing is for certain: it doesn't take much imagination to see that they do resemble giant tree stumps. A brief history of the Smithsonian. Though it may not be immediately obvious, the Smithsonian Institution is an extension of the US government, with congressional members sitting on its board of regents. It was initially founded as an establishment for the increase and diffusion of knowledge among men, at the endowment of the philanthropist, chemist, and mineralogist James Smithson. And while it's not a regulatory agency, it is so intrinsically tied to government that it claims immunity from state and local regulations, as well as immunity from lawsuits, unless recognized by Congress. The Smithsonian was established in 1846 and was tasked with the mission of organizing the anthropological history of the United States. It is sometimes referred to as the nation's attic, as it has amassed somewhere in the range of 154 million items between its myriad museums, research centers, and various facilities. But with phrases like diffusing knowledge coming from a government agency that's been influencing the course of history since the Eurocentric days of a manifest destiny, one might be skeptical about what kind of knowledge was spread and which powers it served. Richard Dewhurst, author of The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, points to a man named John Wesley Powell, the US Director of Ethnology in 1879, who ran the Smithsonian in its nascent years. In his research, Dewhurst uncovered what he refers to as the Powell Doctrine, a paper issued on behalf of the Smithsonian, which issued a decree that no anthropological research should consider any talk of lost tribes henceforth, while also describing natives as uncultured, savage, and lacking signs of higher intellect. Powell wrote, "Hence it will be seen that it is illegitimate to use any pictographic matter of a date anterior to the discovery of the continent by Columbus for historic purposes. It's unclear whether this was Powell's decision, or if it came from instructions on high. However, Dewhurst believes its clear manifest destiny tone led to the subsequent Smithsonian cover-up of an ancient race of giants who preceded Native Americans." Looking back at newspaper clippings dating from the late 1800s into the early 1900s, Dewhurst found a multitude of instances in which citizens from various areas of the country uncovered massive bones of seemingly human origin. Upon reporting these discoveries to media outlets or authorities, Dewhurst said unsuspecting citizens would shortly receive a visit from members of the Smithsonian, who wasted no time sequestering the bones, allegedly bringing them to a museum or research facility, but which were never seen again. One could also find instances of giant skulls and skeletons in local papers with pictures to boot, like the example of the photo from the San Antonio Press showing a giant skull next to two normal skulls for size comparison. The US is not the only country in which these alleged giants of antiquity are said to have been found. In fact, there are accounts dating back several millennia which speak of encounters with living giants or the relics hinting at their existence. In the world's largest prehistoric copper mine in Wales, there are accounts of the discovery of thousands of massive sledgehammers, alleged to weigh somewhere in the range of 60 pounds. Another, more well-known instance of alleged giants comes from the writings of Ferdinand Magellan's chronicler, Antonio Pigafetta, who wrote of a giant race upon discovering Patagonia. Pigafetta wrote, "One day we suddenly saw a naked man of giant stature on the shore of the port, dancing, singing, and throwing dust on his head. The Captain General sent one of our men to the giant, so that he might perform the same actions as a sign of peace. Having done that, the man led the giant to where the Captain General was waiting. When the giant was in the Captain General's and our presence, he marvelled greatly, and made signs with one finger raised upward, believing we had come from the sky. He was so tall that we reached only to his waist, and he was well proportioned. According to the writings of Pigafetta, Magellan and crew attempted to return to Italy with two of the giants they had encountered, though they were unable to survive the long trip back across the Atlantic.
I'm reminded of Jack and the Beanstalk. Remember that story where the vine grows into the heavens, giant vine. Another one, Paul Bunyan, the giant lumberjack, cut down trees. I mean, these are all remnants of that era where the giants lived and the giant trees existed. Yeah, and the Smithsonian and all the cover-ups, they just go to great lengths. They're very creative and going to great lengths to cover up everything and to create a history for the public that is for their benefit of control. And it's just quite, to me, it's just quite interesting how they just go to make movies, books, they bury stuff, artifacts. I mean, they just go to all kinds of lengths to deceive people. And it's just going on, and it has been going on for practically forever, you know, since day one when the controllers or somebody decided to pull the wool over somebody's eyes and to start their series of control and manipulation of people and events. So this is very interesting. Yeah, it's it's always fun to see what people have come up with. There's this Russian guy, Fomenko, I think it is. He's the one that brought out a lot of this. I think he did Flat Earth and Tartarian history. He's a Russian fellow. Of course, they censored him in Russia, called him a quack, but he's had many books on this, on his research about how history has been redone. And who knows where he got his information, but maybe he was one of them and he turned, I'm not sure, but maybe I'll bring him in next week, Fomenko, I think his name was, some of his work, because people have done a lot of research on this. Jamie Lee, who's been banned, I think now on Facebook and YouTube, he's done a lot. We know Max Egan and others are doing a lot. But yeah, we're not here to negate anything. It's just that, just to help people to see that there's more going on, what they might think is going on. And take a look, consider that there's other things behind the scenes. There's always something behind the scenes. Question authority, like the old bumper sticker, question authority. Question what you've been told. Investigate yourself and watch your dreams. Sing the NUUU, and that will help you open up to a more expansive view of what's really going on. And anything else, you guys?
I was just going to add very briefly, I thought it was very interesting, because having looked at a lot of this stuff and been researching some of this material, as we know, the human race were originally a very intelligent sort of monkey type creatures. Then the reptilians came in and genetically remodeled and recreated them to serve to serve as their slaves and forevermore. But it does seem that, based on the information I've been looking at, it would seem that these giant trees of life were so vast that a lot of these histories have made mention of how it seems that humans' ancestors literally lived in these trees, and that was their main habitation, and that these trees also seemed to provide them everything they needed, their home, all the food, because in what I was just recounting, they said these trees contained all the fruits they could possibly require. And so it wouldn't even surprise me as though this world was set up in such a way that the original most intelligent species, which were these ape-like creatures, were just set up in that way. They lived in these gigantic, miles and miles tall trees, and everything they needed was there. Then obviously the reptilians came in, did what they did, got hold of these intelligent monkeys, recreated them, dumbed them down, genetically altered them. And then it seems they then went about chopping down these trees and destroying everything and excavating everything and mining all the gold. So it's very interesting as you read these things, how it all sort of comes together, and also with what Duane has told us and such. Yeah.
And then watch your dreams, like with Kevin and Jeremy here. They have a lot of real side experiences that will show them what was really going on and what is really going on. So that's a source. That's a true source of really, besides the research here in the physical, there's all that too. The real side, what people call dreams, but you can go visit, go back on the timeline, go visit research centers like in Old Eckankar, the Astral Museum, where all these inventions are, where the inventors go to get their ideas from, like Tesla and such. There's all kinds of things going on in the universe. So just a matter of being aware and accessing them. So do your own research. And again, the NUUU is the key here. And we'll end the show giving you an example of how that goes. And then do this like 10 minutes before bed or during the day and see what happens, see what life shows you. NUUU. Jeremy? And Kevin?
NUUU.
Thank you, guys.